All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2021. This is day 31. I've done it, folks. Yet again, one video per day on the day, except for one that was a couple hours a little late for an entire month. Tomorrow, I will actually be doing my kind of traditional wrap-up of a vlog where I talk about the stuff I learned and all that stuff. This is not what's going to be happening today. Originally, the plan for today was I was going to upgrade the Flameo, our Genasi 4th edition Warlord. I was going to upgrade them to Epic tier just to show you just the nonsense that you get into in Epic tier for 4th edition stuff. However, I recently saw a YouTube video that I'm not. I actually don't care about the subject of the YouTube video itself, but it brought up something that I have had to deal with in my training for well over a decade. And I didn't realize it actually had a name. But it does. It has been studied extensively, and it is by far the number one cause of misunderstandings in my personal opinion. And that is the false consensus effect, also known as consensus bias. Effectively, this is what's called a cognitive bias. If you're not familiar with that term, is basically something that influences your perceptions of the world. A bias is going to make you see certain things or focus on certain things and ignore other things, because your bias will kind of manipulate what you focus on. It doesn't stop you from seeing things, but it will allow you to selectively omit certain things from your memory and from your cognitive process. So that's what biases are in general. And we hear about biases a lot when talking about just about anything, like news media is biased and therefore blah 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 blah, or this person is biased so we can't trust their opinion on that. Okay, that's fine. Well, consensus bias, or the false consensus effect, effectively means, give me a second here. Sorry, I literally just woke up. Basically means, well, here, I'll read. This is from Wikipedia, so, take it with a grain of salt. But it's cited pretty well, so. Consensus bias is a pervasive cognitive bias that causes people to, quote, see their own behavioral choices and judgments as relatively common and appropriate to existing circumstances. So effectively, it means that people will assume other people think just like them. And because of that, no matter what they're doing, the justification is basically, well, this is what everybody does. Yeah, I know it's wrong, or yeah, I know it's not, maybe the best choice, but this is what everybody does. And there is some truth to that. There are kind of underlying motivations throughout cultures and just throughout humanity itself, that people will generally make similar decisions when put into specific situations. Some of that is influenced by biology. Some of that is influenced by culture. Like, really, really good example. In the workplace culture of the U.S., it is generally accepted, and if you actually look and look at studies and opinion polls and the things like that, generally the individual, the worker themselves, is expected to get benefits from their employer. Like the employer technically works for or should work for the employee. Our workplace culture in general is very much individualized. Generally, people, when they are working, are going to do what is best for them and their career. Now, again, this is not 100% every single person is like this, but the overall workplace culture, that is what is admired. That is what is kind of expected. That's actually what managers are taught in order to manage US based companies. Is that, every single person is going to be looking towards what is going to be best for them. And for some people, that's going to mean doing what's best for the team, because, rising tide raises all ships. So I'm not saying that everybody in the U.S. Work market is entirely focused on what is best for me. However, that is our workplace culture, which is, you're generally going to do what is best for you in as much as you can understand. You should take care of yourself. Now, if we go to Japan workplace culture, it is completely opposite. You are 100% expected that if you work for a company, your life is significantly less important than the well-being of the company. You are not just expected to make sacrifices for your job. No matter where you are, you could be a plebeian, the lowest low position in the company, or the CEO of the company. You are expected that all of your decisions should be what is best for the company instead of what is best for me. To the point where people are lauded and praised for how much they hurt themselves in order to help the company. That is just the workplace culture. Now, is any of that biologic? No, not in any way, shape, or form. From a biological perspective, a lot of mothers will make the generally correct assumption that a mother will do whatever is necessary to protect their child. That's a biological process. It is built into mothers themselves from a biological basis. Does that mean every single mother does that? No, there are abusive parents that do horrible things to their children. However, the idea that most people think the same way is not 100% out of nowhere. Like, this is just complete bogus. However, the false consensus effect, or consensus bias, becomes a thing when you assume that everything you do, or completely unrelated things, are just what everyone would do. And that's just how everybody thinks. Doesn't matter that I don't see people doing that in their mind. That's what they want to do, but they don't because of this, and this. And that's where the bias comes in, because the bias itself is you are not interpreting data that you are getting. You are theorizing and justifying the data so that it fits with an idea you already had. That's where the bias comes in. It's like, well, see, that person is picking up that litter, but they're not doing it because, it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because that other person saw them walk past it, and they knew that if they didn't pick it up, then that person would think that they were a bad person. So it's not that they care about the environment. They care about what other people think of them. If no one was there, they definitely wouldn't have picked it up. Well, there's no way for that person to know that. They can't get into that person's mind and see what their actual motivations are. They haven't actually gone up and talked to the person. No, they are seeing something and finding a way to justify it by implying motives where there is none there. And that's what the false consensus effect is. So, how does that translate to training? Well, I have rules for training. One of these days, I keep saying this over and over again, and maybe one day I will stop saying it and I'll actually do it. But one of these days I want to write a book. And the book will be basically my rules for training. I have a bunch of different rules that I rely on when I start training people. And the two most important rules that I tell every single person when I first start teaching people how to train someone else, which is a thing, a lot of people don't realize that just because you understand how to do something doesn't mean you can teach someone else. That is a completely different skill set. The two most important rules are begin at the beginning and remember to kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. And the reason why is when someone that is knowledgeable about something tries to teach someone else, they assume, using kind of a conflated version of the consensus bias. It's not 100% a consensus bias, but it does kind of operate on the same thought process. They assume that things that they understand, this other person is going to understand as well. That they think the same way. Really good example. I watch, I made a video a little while back about Josh Strife Hayes playing Rift. I think it was Rift. Yeah, it was Rift. And he spent like an hour or something without using any of his ability bars. And I couldn't understand how he could do that, because when I get into a new game or a new anything, the first thing I do is I gather as much information as I can. I look at every single thing and I try and learn what every single thing means. In a video game specifically, I look at the UI and I go, okay, that means that, that means that, that means that. If there's anything that's not explained on the UI, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test that to see if I can figure out what it does. I mentioned before, the bar at the bottom of the screen is the largest part of the UI in the entire thing. It is bigger than anything else on the screen. And for over an hour, he just ignored it, thinking that it didn't matter. And that didn't make any sense to me, because I don't understand how anyone could start something and not immediately look at the biggest thing and go, well, that must be important. That's is a form of consensus bias. Me assuming that everyone thinks the way that I do. Now, I did back up my statement to the point where going, okay, if just someone that had never played an MMO before were to do that, I could completely understand them just ignoring that aspect, because they haven't been done that. For someone like Josh Strife Hayes, who has done dozens and dozens and dozens of MMOs, and Rift is a really, really standard tab target MMO. It was a WoW clone. They all work the exact same way. You tab target something and then you push abilities until the thing dies. That's how every single one of them. And there are hundreds of WoW clones out there. A lot of them don't exist anymore. You can't play them anymore because they died, because all they were was WoW with a different paint job and less creative writing. So in my particular critique of him, I did go on more than just the idea of, well, I think that way, so he should think that way as well. I did go, no, it doesn't. It's not really justifiable for someone that has that much experience to simply ignore. In the same way that having a licensed computer tech not check to see if something is plugged in and charging you, $4,000 to repair your power supply and rewire your entire computer because they never checked if it was plugged in. That's completely unjustified. That is part of their job. That's one of the first things you do. That's why in the IT crowd, it's like, hello, IT, have you tried turning it off and on again? Is it plugged in? Fine, I'll be there in a second. That's why you did it. It's the first thing that you always check into tech support. So, anyway, moving back to the idea of cognitive of consensus bias. This is something that really causes a lot of issues when you're communicating, because people will imply motivation and imply intent where there is none, simply because that's the way that they think. And so they go, well, I think this way, and everyone must think this way, otherwise I'm weird. And that's where you get these arguments and these misunderstandings that could quite literally have been solved simply by communicating. And this is one of the reasons why I tend to have really, really strong opinions about most media that depicts anyone that is not neurotypical. Because what always happens is the neurotypical people will just speak to a non-neurotypical person as if using a bunch of colloquialisms and a bunch of terminology that the non-neurotypical person simply wouldn't have the ability to understand, no matter what. Not simply because they're non-neurotypical. A lot of this is very specialized colloquialisms and things meant for specific fields or things like that. And it would always drive me nuts because all it would take for most of these, a lot of them are dramedy style films. All it would take for the entire conflict of the entire movie to be solved is for one person to sit down and go, "Hey, are you understanding what I'm saying?" And for the other person to go, "No, I don't," and go, "Okay, well, let's figure out how we can understand this." That would solve 90% of non-neurotypical film, just in general. Anytime you see someone with a mental illness on screen, 90% of the problems are caused entirely by consensus bias, where they can just say words that mean something to them and mean nothing to this other person. And this happens in every single field. I bring up the idea of mental illness in cinema just because it's something that's really, really obvious when you look at it, because it's taken to an extreme, specifically because just in entertainment in general, they have to make mental illness like this strange alien concept where people that struggle with mental illness are so far removed from the world that they might as well be their own species, which isn't true in any way, shape, or form, but it makes for a more dramatic story. But I used to see this all the time in tech support because I would train my associates to do minor tech support and stuff like that, because we had a tech support service in this as a store. And I would have to tell them things like, okay, asking them if they've rebooted their machine is a bad thing to do. What do you mean? Reboot? How do you not know what reboot means? Like, it's the easiest word. If it's not a term that you've grown up with, you don't know what it is. Or asking them, okay, try turning it off and on again. That seems like a really, really easy thing to do, but I cannot tell you how many times I had customers that I said, okay, well, why don't you try just restarting the computer? Or why don't you try just turning it off and turning it on again? And what they would do is they would take their laptop and they would close it, wait a couple seconds, and then open it again. Because when they close it, all the lights turn off. And then when they open it, the screen is black for a second, but then it pops on. So that has to mean that they turned it off and they turned it back on again. That's what that means. Well, no, it doesn't. That's putting into hibernation mode. That's putting into this as a sleep mode. It's not turning it off in any way, shape, or form, and it doesn't help. If anyone is not aware of why turning it off and on again actually does something for a computer, it's because when you shut a computer down, a lot of what a computer is doing is saved in its memory. And so if something goes wrong and that memory is still active, those processes are still going on, it can cause the computer to keep having problems and things like that. But once you turn it off, a lot of that memory is purged because it's no longer active. It's no longer getting power. It's no longer being used. So they just get rid of all that stuff. And so turning a computer off and then turning it back on again actually gets rid of a lot of bad processes that there really is no other way to get rid of. We don't have a way to manually, well, technically there are ways to do it, but it's super, super dangerous and can brick your computer really easily. And even people that are masters at programming things like that don't do that because it's not worth it. The easiest way to do is you turn off your computer, and that will purge a large portion of your memory. Now, another thing that people don't understand, things like when you reset your router, they specifically tell you to turn it off and unplug it for 10 seconds. Well, why can't I just turn it off? You just told me if you turn it off, it purges. Yes, but there is other parts of your memory that is actually stored longer than that. As long as the computer has power, it will keep that memory stored. It's something that helps your computer to start up faster. It helps it do other things like that. But by removing the power from it, from something like your modem, and waiting 10 seconds, because you actually have a battery, you have a power supply inside your modem, inside your computer. You wait 10 seconds for it to actually run out of residual charge. Well, now that there's no power to that system, it goes away. That's why that does something. Now, your average person has no idea that that's why you are asking them to turn it off and turn it on again, or to unplug it and wait to 10 seconds. They think that it's just like a way to waste your time because they are using their consensus bias. They're going, well, I don't like dealing with people that I think are dumber than I am. It's not fun. And this person obviously thinks I am dumber than they are. So they're going to just put me through these hoops just because that's what they think. Or the other very, very common process is, well, they're just reading off a list and I don't have to do everything they say because I'm smarter than them. And so I don't actually have to do that. I cannot tell you how many times when I was a private computer tech, I told people specifically, okay, do this. And they go, okay, done. And I go, no, it's not. They say, well, I just told you it's done. I said, it's not possible for it to be done. It takes this long for it to be done. And it makes this sound that I didn't hear. Because I would do phone tech support. A lot of it. And they go, okay, well, do I really need to do that? Yes, that's why I told you to do it. Well, why do I need to do that? Well, I could tell you, but it's going to take me about 10 minutes to explain the process because it is relatively technical. So why don't you go ahead and start it, and then while we're waiting for it to happen, I will explain why we need to do that. And that was generally enough to do it. But that is a consensus bias. So they go, well, you're implying intent where there is none. If I was in their situation, I would be doing this, and they think the exact same way that I do. That is the entire underlying thought of consensus bias. So everyone thinks the way that I do, and therefore I can interpret their motives based on what I would do in that situation. The hardest thing in the world for people to learn is that people do not think like you. Now again, this is not 100%. There are no hard and fast rules when it comes into motivation and intent. Anytime you say, well, this is how people think, there will always be not just one exception. There will be hundreds, if not thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of exceptions to that rule all the time. There is no hard, fast rules in psychology and things like that. However, there are things that tend to be more common than not. You know, you might have the majority of people tend to think this way. And that's where you start running into issues with consensus bias because you assume majority means 99% instead of majority meaning 51%. Because that's all a majority is 51%. And a lot of psychological principles don't even operate on majorities. They operate on pluralities. If you're not familiar with the difference, a majority is 51%. A plurality is less than 50%, but is still the largest of the available options. So if you have 4 options A, B, C, and D, Option A is 30%. Option B is 20%. Option C is 25%, and option D is 25%. Well, you have 100% there. However, option A is the plurality because it is the most common, but it's not a majority. It's not 51%. So anyway, so a lot of psychological principles and things like that work on pluralities, and a lot the rest work on majorities. There's nothing that is a hard fast rule. And when you start dealing with intent and motivation and things like that, assuming everyone thinks the same way that you do will always cause problems because you will take shortcuts. Again, that's where my idea of begin at the beginning and keep it simple is stupid. Don't skip steps. A lot of people skip steps because they go, oh, well, I wouldn't need to know this because I think this way. So this person won't need to know this because we both think the same way. And you don't. Don't skip steps. Always begin at the beginning. If I am trying to help someone with their computer, and they go, oh, I can't get my computer work. Okay. Well, what's going on with the computer? Well, the screen is just black. Okay. Let's start at the beginning. Is the computer on? Well, yes, it's on. Okay. When I say that, what do you think? I'm asking. Are you talking about the screen thing? Are you talking about the boxy thing? Well, the boxy thing is on. Okay. For the boxy thing, is there a power button on it? Well, yes. And the power button, is there a light behind it that's like green? It's like, no, the light is red. Okay, well, what that means, if the light is red, that sometimes means that it has power, but it's not been turned on yet. The button will turn green if it's actually on. Why don't you go ahead and press the button for me? Okay, I can do that. Boom. Oh my God, you fixed my computer. Yeah, it's really, really common. Don't feel bad about it. Like I said, it's not a 100% thing. Sometimes power on means the button is red. Sometimes power on means the button is green. Sometimes the button doesn't have any lights on it at all, and the lights are somewhere else. Don't feel bad about not understanding this particular one. It's a really common thing. Had I just gone, okay, well, if it's on, then let's do this. Let's check the cables. Let's do this. Why don't you plug in a new monitor? Like, I would go through all these other things, and the only problem was, okay, they didn't understand what on meant. Another one that was really, really common. I keep turning it on. There's nothing. There's no lights. There's no nothing. Okay. Is the power supply turned on? Well, I pushed the button in front. No. If you go to the back, there should be a master power switch on the back of your tower. Oh, I didn't even know that was there. All right, so there should be a line and there should be a circle on the switch on either side. Is the line pushed in or is the circle pushed in? Well, the line's pushed in. Go ahead and push the circle in. Oh my God, it's working! Yep, that's your master power supply. Even if it's plugged in, if that's not turned on, the rest of the computer won't get power because it's off. So yeah, that was your only problem was that. Again, a lot of people have no idea that's even the thing. I know, being a computer tech, I have had entire computers that I've bought brand new and have used until they were worthless that I have never messed with a master power supply. I just never needed to. I would just unplug it, and technically I should have turned it off, but I didn't because I wasn't taking the appropriate steps. But yeah, I just never did it. So anyway, so I thought it was interesting because consensus bias is such, again, it is one of, if not the most common cognitive biases in the world. They have done studies about it constantly, and it constantly causes problems because people use it for a number of different ways. One of the most common is to justify them doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Well, everybody would do this. Like the idea of the person picking up a piece of trash. This person can justify, well, I'm not going to pick up trash because even though someone else would do it, nobody really does that. Nobody wants to do that. The only reason anyone would ever do it is if someone's watching them, and no one's watching them but me right now, so I don't have to do that. You see this absolutely everywhere, and the most difficult thing in the world to learn is to approach a conversation with someone operating under the assumption that you don't have the same thought process, that you actively go into a conversation with the intent of learning how they think differently than you. And for me personally, I have not had a huge issue with consensus bias in a long time because due to my training background and having to deal with this so often, and the fact that my brain does work differently than most people that I've found. I found that approaching a conversation with someone with the express idea that their thought process is going to be completely different than yours actually makes the conversation significantly more interesting, because I have to listen to everything that they say, and it encourages me to ask more questions and learn more about them, specifically, more open-ended questions that reveal intent and motivation into the things like that, because I don't assume I know why they're doing things. And because of that, every single conversation I get into, even with people that I'm very good for friends with, I approach from the idea that the way I view this situation is going to be inherently different than the way you view it. And the thought processes I go through in this are always going to be different than the ones you do. And it makes for really entertaining, interesting conversation for me personally. That hurt. My keyboard is super nice, but it's also metal. And so I just hit my hand on it. It hurt like hell. So, if there's anything that if you learn from Daily December, from me ever, it is this: approach every interaction you have with every person you ever meet as if they are a completely different, separate entity from you, that is wholly unique in their thought processes, in their motivations, in their likes, in their dislikes. Don't assume you know who a person is or how they think until you actually talk to them and ask them about it. If you approach every single conversation from that perspective, every single time you talk to a new person, it will be an enjoyable experience, because you will learn things that you never knew about. Even unpleasant people can make for interesting conversations. Even outright bad people can make for interesting conversations, because you can get an insight into their thought process, and you can learn about how a completely different kind of mind works. And as much as we all do want to belong to a whole and assume that, we're all the same, we're not. Every single person is their own unique being with their own motivations, their own their own experiences that color their own perceptions. So, yeah. Talk to someone you've talked to 100 times before, but go into the conversation not assuming you know what motivates them. And just watch how the conversation seems massively different. All right? That is all for me today, and that is all for Daily December 2021. I have done it again. I highly recommend doing this because it is such a crazy thing to do. And I will see you guys tomorrow for my wrap up and what I learned. All right? Bye-bye.